Ooh, that is beautiful. Hello. Spending my time this morning in nature, connecting to my own nature through chanting and meditating and breathing and moving and all of the above. And I was just reminiscing on the essence of this creative flow that we can sink into, especially when we forget about ourselves for a moment. It's like when we come into nature, most of our identity and who we think we are and all these things kind of dissolves into the space that is here. And especially when we go into a space, say within a forest or something that is quite open, and there's open and untouched. It's not busy, there's not people around, it's pretty gentle and quiet. And we sink into this kind of melding or melting into the forest, where our identity that has become so strongly rooted through the perpetual thinking of our identity, what we have to do, who we've become, who we're going to be, where we're headed, where we're not headed, what we like, what we don't like, etc., which is constantly being reiterated when, say, we're very much in an area where that identity is triggered, whether that's the city, whether that's on our phones, on social media, whether that's with a bunch of people. It's not to say we cannot be in these areas, because it's natural, but it's that in the spaces where there's a lot of rigid patterns of thinking and doing and believing and being and experiencing, then it's very quick that one can forget who they truly are and forget the expression of their creativity that comes and is such a blissful and powerfully blissful experience. I was just meditating here and connecting to the dissolution of self, coming into the true loving bliss that exists within this body, within this heart. And everything then becomes blissful, hearing the sounds of the leaves falling, hearing the animals, hearing the trees crackle, hearing the wind, feeling the sun. Everything becomes a blissful experience because you're seeing from the perception of this natural emanation, which is bliss, which is love. And I posted the video this week about awareness being this expression of love. And so when we sink into the silence of our own awareness and the silence of being, which is not even really localized in any particular place, it doesn't even exist the way that we traditionally think things exist, like these leaves or this body or this breath or whatever. It's an essence of ourselves in which we deeply know and we've connected to and we can always come back to. But it's something that the mind can't grasp. It can't put in a box. It can't stay rooted in it and identify with it over time. And so when we surrender back to that place, which can be extremely frightening for the mind, when especially in the deeper levels of meditation, the mind may freak out and be like, oh, I'm dissolving into being nothing, just like the common mind or the logical mind when they're in a forest. I was talking to a friend the other day. I'm like, sometimes I feel like you just want to, do the hike and finish the hike, and then we're done and we go home. And reminds me of my dad actually sometimes. We go into the forest and then we get to this beautiful place where I'll just end up wanting to just lie around and touch trees and go in the water and chill and meditate. But it's kind of like just a scene, like, oh, let's see it and now let's go back home. And to each their own. But there's a natural something there, when we think about and feel into the mind that may resist the infinite spectrum of creativity that exists within nature. And likewise, when we connect into, the depth of our heart, the depth of a true blissful awareness, everything then becomes that blissful awareness. Everything becomes that blissful light, that blissful love. Every sensation, every perception, every experience. And so this can only happen when there's a dissolution of the lower identity, the identity that wants to separate and categorize everything into some sort of box, and in a sense keep holding to the illusion that there are separate things, that there's this and then there's that and then there's me and then there's the objects of what's being seen and observed and experienced. It's just a constant separating. And of course this comes back to the root of the separation from our identity, from source, from the true source of all, which is what makes up all of life, the good, bad, and the ugly. And so the practice of this, you know, coming into nature and just existing and going through the forest and having no real plan and just, you know, breathing through it, meditating, feeling, singing, moving with the energy in whatever way that this can occur. It's synonymous to the previous video I talked about how we can experience you know, a full fractalized perception of nature, which means, you know, we're not just perceiving the tree, we're perceiving all of the tree. You know, we're not just perceiving the sounds and the feelings, we're perceiving all of the sounds and the feelings. And if you know, get what I mean, you'll get what I mean there. I'm watching this like really cute mouse actually. It's so funny. I don't think you'll be able to see it. But oh, he or she is just running around. It's really cute. So, you know, what we're sharing here is that as we dissolve the false identity, or what someone would typically call the ego or things like this, as we dissolve this false illusion that there is a separate self and we are separate from the movements of nature, the movements of energy, the movements of our soul family, the movements of our path, our purpose, the movements of existence itself, we become in tune with the blissfulness in which all moments can be. So we're not so concerned about past and future, we're not so concerned about where we're headed and where we think we can need to get, we're not so concerned about the ways in which we need to defend and protect this identity and perpetually uphold it, right? And this is why the addiction to thought, the addiction to beliefs, the addiction to needing to share our opinions and, you know, place our stake in the ground of what we think and what others think. And these are healthy things in doses, but they can very quickly become detrimental and even dangerous things. I mean, the danger in which this can occur in the world, we've seen this time and time again, and we're seeing it now during election time and all of this too. So it's vitally important that we experience this essence of being, which is not dependent on us coming in a forest. You can do this in the depth of a, you know, downtown core. You can do this in a dark room. You can do this in the sun. You can do this everywhere. It's the willingness to connect to that aspect of self, that aspect of us that we know is there. But that is not tied to the identities and beliefs and rigid patterns and perspectives that we've generally been on the other side of. You know, the balance has generally been on the side in the head-centric, modern, more masculine-oriented society to be held to things in which we think keep us safe, like logic and justifications and rationalizations and ideas, beliefs, opinions that are generally very strong, you know. But it doesn't really matter how strong you are, you know, or how strong the mind is. When it comes into a forest, when it comes into a space where, or an intention that you've created to connect to your own nature, that mind starts to meld back into itself, starts to dissolve back into itself. And as it dissolves back into itself, this is where we can actually feel ourself, maybe for the first time. And ourself is not just this flesh and bone, it's the self of all. It's the self and the true source in which makes up all life and brings life and love to everything. And so there is a practice to this. I put up a recent meditation actually on my YouTube where you can go watch, and I may do some more like that. But you know, we're also connecting one-on-one with many of you, you know, on video chat and stuff, and because the practice can be different for each of us, it's not always the same. But the principles of breath, the principles of awareness, the principles of meditation and chanting and body movement and keeping the inner sides, you know, healthy and loved and silent, you know, this is a starting point. So I'm going to continue. Deep love to all of you, and yeah, be well. Oh.